Hello everybody, welcome to my channel.
Ted Kennedy, a legacy of public service and legislative mastery. Edward Ted Kennedy, February 22, 1932 to August 25, 2009, was one of the most influential American lawmakers of the 20th and early 21st centuries. A member of the famed Kennedy political family and the youngest brother of President John F. Kennedy and Senator Robert F. Kennedy, he forged his own path as a legislative powerhouse, leaving an enduring impact on American public life. Early life and education. Born in Boston, Massachusetts, Ted Kennedy grew up in a family defined by public service and political ambition. He attended Harvard University, where his academic career was briefly interrupted due to a misconduct incident. But he later returned and completed his studies. After earning a law degree from the University of Virginia School of Law, he served briefly in the U.S. Army before entering the world of politics. Rise to the U.S. Senate. Ted Kennedy entered the Senate in 1962, winning the Massachusetts seat previously held by his brother John before he became president. At just 30 years old, the minimum age required to serve, Kennedy began what would become one of the longest and most significant senatorial careers in American history, spanning nearly 47 years. Legislative achievements. Kennedy quickly developed a reputation as a skilled negotiator and passionate advocate for social reform. His legislative priorities centered on civil rights, healthcare, education, and labor protections. Over the decades, he played a key role in shaping hundreds of laws, earning the nickname the Lion of the Senate. His major contributions include civil rights and voting rights legislation. Kennedy was a steadfast supporter of racial equality and championed key expansions of voting protections. Education advances. He helped craft the No Child Left Behind Act and worked on expanding access to early childhood education and student financial aid. Healthcare reform. One of his signature issues, Kennedy pushed tirelessly for universal healthcare and was instrumental in the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP. Labor and immigration laws. He advocated for fair wages, worker protections, and immigration reform, influencing policy for generations. His ability to work across the aisle made him one of the most effective lawmakers of his era. Challenges and controversy. Kennedy's career also included moments of profound struggle. The 1969 Chappaquiddick incident, in which Mary Jo Kopechne died after Kennedy's car went off a bridge, cast a long shadow over his public image and derailed his presidential ambitions. Although he remained in the Senate, the incident became a defining controversy in his life. Despite political setbacks, Kennedy continued to serve with determination and became a central figure in national debates for decades. Later years and final years. Even as he aged, Kennedy maintained his influence in Washington. He remained an active legislator until he was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor in 2008. His illness prompted an outpouring of national sympathy and highlighted his bipartisan respect. Kennedy passed away on August 25, 2009, at his home in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. Legacy. Ted Kennedy's legacy is one of enduring public service. His commitment to social justice, bipartisan collaboration, and the belief that government should work for the common good left an indelible imprint on American politics. While his personal life was marked by tragedy and controversy, his legislative record remains one of the most substantial in U.S. history. He is remembered not just as a member of the Kennedy dynasty, but as a transformative senator who shaped the nation through persistence, passion, and an unwavering dedication to the American people. Ted Kennedy, the Lion of the Senate and the lasting influence of a political dynasty. Edward Moore, Ted Kennedy stands as one of the most consequential legislators in American history. Over a career that spanned nearly half a century, Kennedy shaped fundamental aspects of the U.S. legal and social landscape, from civil rights and healthcare to immigration and education. His life, marked by both triumph and tragedy, reflects the complex interplay between personal legacy and national leadership. Early life, family influence, and formative years. Born on February 22, 1932. In Boston, Massachusetts, Ted Kennedy was the youngest of 9 children in the Kennedy family. His parents, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. and Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy, cultivated an environment steeped in ambition, faith, public duty, and competitive spirit. Watching his elder brothers, John and Robert, rise into politics inevitably shaped his worldview and aspirations. Kennedy attended Milton Academy before enrolling at Harvard University. His early academic career encountered a setback when he was expelled for cheating on an exam, though he was later readmitted. This incident humbled him and fostered a lifelong understanding of personal accountability, a theme that would recur throughout his public life. After Harvard, Kennedy served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War era, stationed mostly in Europe. He later attended the University of Virginia School of Law, where he developed a deeper interest in policy and public service. Entry into politics and the 1962 Senate victory. Ted Kennedy's political rise began when the Senate seat vacated by his brother John's ascension to the presidency became open. Despite critics labeling him inexperienced and too young, Kennedy won the 1962 special election after turning 30, the constitutional minimum age for senators, barely a month before the vote. His victory marked the beginning of a Senate career that would span 47 years, making him one of the longest-serving senators in U.S. history. Emergence as a legislative powerhouse. In the early years, Kennedy worked to build credibility. He served on committees, mastered legislative processes, and cultivated relationships across party lines. Over time, his talent for negotiation, his passionate speeches, and his willingness to reach compromise earned him the respect of colleagues from both parties. Key legislative areas. 1. Civil rights and social justice. Kennedy was deeply involved in the fight for racial equality. His support helped expand voting protections, enforce desegregation laws, and pass key civil rights legislation from the 1960s onward. He often cited Robert Kennedy's assassination in 1968 as a motivating force behind his dedication to justice and equality. 2. Education reform. Kennedy's influence on American education policy was profound. He championed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, Head Start and Early Childhood Funding Pell Grant expansion, the No Child Left Behind Act, which he co-authored. Although he later criticized its implementation, his work consistently focused on providing opportunities to disadvantaged children and expanding access to higher education. 3. Healthcare advocacy. Healthcare became Kennedy's signature cause. He fought for universal healthcare for decades, advocating for reforms to make healthcare more affordable and accessible. His major accomplishments include the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, mental health parity laws, AIDS research and treatment funding, improvements in Medicare and Medicaid protections even during his final months. Kennedy played a symbolic role in the early stages of what would become the Affordable Care Act. 4. Immigration and labor protections. Kennedy shaped modern immigration policy, promoting fairness, family reunification, and pathways for legal status. He also supported minimum wage increases, worker safety laws, and union protections. The Chappaquiddick tragedy and its consequences. On July 18, 1969, the Chappaquiddick incident profoundly altered Kennedy's personal and political trajectory. After driving off a bridge on Chappaquiddick Island, Kennedy escaped his car, but passenger Mary Jo Kopechne died. Kennedy failed to report the accident promptly, resulting in a legal and moral scandal. Although he remained in the Senate, the incident severely damaged his reputation and effectively ended serious chances of a successful presidential run. Kennedy acknowledged his failings in a televised statement, but the tragedy shadowed his life and career for decades. Attempted presidential run in 1980. Despite widespread speculation, Kennedy largely avoided presidential campaigns until 1980, when he challenged incumbent President Jimmy Carter for the Democratic nomination. Although Kennedy received strong grassroots support and delivered a famously eloquent concession speech, "The work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die," he ultimately lost the nomination. Afterward, he returned his full focus to the Senate, where his influence continued to grow. Senate leadership, statesmanship, and bipartisan reputation. By the 1990s and 2000s, Kennedy was regarded as the most effective legislator of his generation. He was known for deep policy expertise, long-term commitment to issues rather than short-term politics, willingness to collaborate with Republicans on major legislation. Figures across the political spectrum, including Orrin Hatch, John McCain, and even conservative leaders, praised his fairness and sincerity in negotiations. Kennedy believed in incremental progress when sweeping reform was impossible, often working for small steps that later produced monumental changes. Final years, illness, and passing. In May 2008, Kennedy was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, glioblastoma. Despite aggressive treatment, he continued working, making symbolic appearances in the Senate during key votes. His presence, even during illness, underscored his dedication to public service. Ted Kennedy died on August 25, 2009, at age 77. His passing marked the end of an era for the Kennedy political dynasty. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery near his brothers John and Robert, completing the arc of a family that profoundly shaped American history. Legacy and historical significance. Ted Kennedy's legacy is vast and enduring. He authored or co-authored more than 300 major laws and influenced countless others. His work remains embedded in modern civil rights protections, the American education system, the nation's healthcare structure, immigration and labor policy beyond legislation. Kennedy played the role of mentor and moral voice within the Senate, guiding younger lawmakers and offering a stabilizing presence during national crises. A legacy of persistence and compassion. Kennedy believed deeply in the power of government to improve lives. His public statements frequently emphasized compassion, equality, and the moral responsibility of leadership. While his personal life was marked by tragedy, controversy, and human flaws, his public service reflected determination, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to social progress. Ted Kennedy, architect of modern American liberalism and the enduring lion of the Senate. Edward Moore. Ted Kennedy remains one of the most influential and prolific legislators in United States history. Over nearly 5 decades in the U.S. Senate, Kennedy authored and shaped transformative legislation touching civil rights, education, healthcare, labor, immigration, and social welfare. His career, spanning from the Cold War era to the early 21st century, reflected the shifting political landscape of America and the evolution of its social conscience. Kennedy's story is also deeply intertwined with the tragedy, triumph, and mythos of the Kennedy family. While overshadowed early in life by his iconic brothers, John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, Ted forged his own identity as a legislative titan, earning the enduring title, the Lion of the Senate. Early life, growing in the Kennedy shadow. Born into wealth, political ambition, and public expectation, Ted Kennedy grew up with enormous pressures and expectations. His father, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., envisioned political greatness for his sons. Ted, as the youngest, had the advantage of learning from his brother's successes and challenges. Childhood and education. Kennedy's upbringing oscillated between the disciplined environment created by his mother and the intense political aspirations of his father. At Milton Academy and later at Harvard University, he developed a natural charisma but also demonstrated a youthful rebelliousness. His expulsion from Harvard for cheating, though temporary, served as a significant personal reckoning. Military service. His service in the U.S. Army from 1951 to 1953 instilled more discipline. Though he did not see combat, his time stationed in Europe broadened his worldview and exposed him to the post-war geopolitical climate. Law school and path toward politics. After returning to finish Harvard, Kennedy pursued law at the University of Virginia, where he began shaping his political identity through debate, community legal work, and volunteer service. The 1962 Senate election and the start of a long career. With John Kennedy in the White House and Robert serving as Attorney General, Ted's entry into the 1962 Senate race came with intense scrutiny. Critics questioned whether he was too inexperienced, too privileged, or too dependent on family connections. But Kennedy countered with effective campaigning, powerful debate performances, and a personable, approachable style. His victory, at age 30, marked the start of one of the most enduring careers in the Senate's history. 3. Building influence. Legislative growth and committee leadership. Ted Kennedy spent years mastering Senate procedure and cultivating working relationships. Over time, he became known for his willingness to roll up his sleeves and work deep in policy details. His early work included issues such as voting rights, immigration reform, healthcare modernization, judicial reform. Committee assignments. Kennedy served on numerous committees, but none defined him more than Senate Judiciary Committee, Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, Help Committee. He ultimately chaired the Help Committee, from which he advanced much of his signature legislation. IV. Key legislative achievements and policy legacy. 1. Civil rights and social justice. Kennedy became a leading voice for racial equality following the assassination of Robert Kennedy. He championed the Civil Rights Act expansions, fair housing legislation, voting rights amendments, employment discrimination protections. He also became a strong ally of disability rights groups, playing a central role in the formation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. 2. Education reform. Few modern politicians have shaped U.S. education policy as deeply as Kennedy. He played a role in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act reforms, integrated education funding for low-income districts, Title IX enforcement, Pell Grant expansions, Higher Education Act amendments. His work on No Child Left Behind reflected his willingness to collaborate even with conservative administrations when he believed progress was possible. 3. Healthcare reform and the dream of universal coverage. Healthcare was Kennedy's most enduring passion. For decades he fought for universal insurance coverage, expanded mental health coverage, AIDS research and treatment programs, state children's health programs, medical privacy protections. His bipartisan Mental Health Parity Act with Senator Pete Domenici stands as a major achievement. Even from his sickbed in the final year of his life, he continued advocating for what would become the Affordable Care Act. 4. Labor rights and economic justice. Kennedy supported minimum wage increases, worker health and safety laws, pension protections, Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, fair labor modernization. His philosophy was grounded in the belief that economic fairness was central to democracy. 5. Immigration reform. Kennedy co-authored major immigration bills that shaped modern U.S. immigration policy, including landmark laws in 1965, 1986, and the early 2000s. His focus emphasized family reunification, fair employment practices, pathways to legal status, refugee and asylum protections. His work with Republican Senator John McCain on immigration in the 2000s remains one of the most significant bipartisan efforts in recent history. Versus personal struggles, tragedy, and redemption. The death of his brothers deeply impacted Kennedy. John's assassination in 1963 and Robert's in 1968 thrust him into the role of family patriarch and protector. These tragedies caused emotional turmoil that sometimes reflected in his personal behavior. Chappaquiddick. The 1969 incident on Chappaquiddick Island, where Mary Jo Kopechne died, became the greatest crisis of Kennedy's life. His delayed reporting and the murky details of the night damaged his reputation permanently and ended his presidential ambitions. Kennedy confronted the public, admitted fault, and worked to rebuild trust through legislative service. Alcohol struggles and public scrutiny throughout the 1970s and 1980s. Kennedy privately battled alcohol issues and public controversies. Yet he continued to excel legislatively, earning the respect of colleagues for his ability to perform under immense personal pressures. The 1980 presidential campaign. Kennedy's challenge to incumbent President Jimmy Carter became one of the most dramatic intra-party battles in Democratic history. Although he did not win the nomination, his concession speech is remembered as one of the most moving rhetorical moments in American politics. The later years, statesman, mentor, and guardian of liberal ideals. From the 1990s onward, Kennedy emerged as a senior statesman in the Senate. He served as mentor to younger senators, including Barack Obama, offering guidance on legislation, strategy, and the moral responsibilities of leadership. He was known for late-night negotiations, detailed policy memos, warmth and humor behind the scenes. Commitment to bipartisanship when needed despite fierce partisanship in Washington. Kennedy maintained friendships with Republicans and was widely respected as a dealmaker. 8. The final chapter. Ted Kennedy's glioblastoma diagnosis in 2008 shocked the political world. Throughout chemotherapy and declining health, he continued working, including appearing during critical Senate votes. His final public message expressed hope for the future of healthcare reform, a cause he had championed for decades. Kennedy died on August 25, 2009. Surrounded by family, his funeral drew world leaders, past presidents, and thousands of everyday Americans whose lives had been touched by his work. Legacy. The lion's roar and the future of his ideals. Ted Kennedy's impact is felt across modern American society. Through nearly 5 decades in the Senate, he influenced more than 300 major laws and countless smaller reforms. He is remembered for his unmatched legislative skill, his moral voice on issues of justice, his fierce advocacy for the marginalized, his complex, deeply human personal story, his role as custodian of the Kennedy political legacy. Though imperfect, a man marked by tragedy, controversy, and personal challenges, Ted Kennedy transformed American politics through perseverance, empathy, and relentless dedication to public service. His legacy endures in classrooms, hospitals, workplaces, and communities across the nation. Ted Kennedy, a monumental political life. Expanded deep dive biography. Ted Kennedy's long Senate career is inseparable from the evolution of modern American liberalism. To understand Kennedy is to understand how U.S. domestic policy shifted from the 1960s to the early 21st century. The longevity, breadth, and complexity of Kennedy's service make him one of the most studied lawmakers in American history. Below is a vastly expanded continuation of his life story. offering deeper examination of his political thought, working style, legislative philosophy, and influence on both the Democratic Party and the nation. X. Political philosophy. The core beliefs that guided a career Ted Kennedy's ideology can be summarized as compassionate, government-driven liberalism, shaped by three key influences. 1. The New Deal legacy. Kennedy grew up in a world shaped by Franklin D. Roosevelt's policies, which proved that government intervention could alleviate poverty and expand opportunity. This worldview aligned perfectly with his family's ethos of service. 2. Catholic social teaching. Kennedy's faith, particularly concepts like economic justice, care for the poor, and human dignity, deeply informed his policy priorities. Though personally liberal on social issues, many of his motivations stemmed from Catholic principles. 3. Personal tragedy. The assassinations of his brothers John and Robert, as well as the many tragedies that befell the family, deepened Ted's empathy. He often said, "Much has been given to me by being a Kennedy. Much has been taken, and much is expected." These beliefs produced a legislator who saw government as a tool for moral action. 11. Foreign policy positions. Often overshadowed but highly influential, though chiefly known for domestic policy, Kennedy played important roles in foreign affairs. 1. Vietnam and post-Vietnam. Kennedy opposed the Vietnam War earlier than many establishment Democrats. His stance helped shift public opinion and contributed to the war's political unraveling. 2. Northern Ireland. Kennedy was a Central American advocate for peace in Northern Ireland. He pressured British and Irish leaders to seek diplomatic solutions and strongly supported the Good Friday Agreement. 3. Apartheid. Kennedy took bold positions against apartheid in South Africa, supporting sanctions and calling for the release of Nelson Mandela long before it was a popular stance. 4. Soviet relations. He supported arms control, nuclear de-escalation, and diplomatic engagement during the Cold War's final decade, often siding with peace activists and moderates. 12. Relationship with U.S. presidents. Kennedy's interactions with presidents shape much of modern political history. John F. Kennedy, as his older brother, JFK, inspired Ted's belief in public service. Ted often said that much of his Senate career was spent trying to complete the work John had begun. Lyndon B. Johnson LBJ respected Kennedy's work on civil rights and education, but the Vietnam War strained relations. Nonetheless, Johnson often solicited Kennedy's counsel. Richard Nixon. Kennedy and Nixon frequently clashed, but surprisingly cooperated on certain health and education issues. Nixon admired Kennedy's legislative skills. Jimmy Carter. The relationship was tense, culminating in Kennedy's 1980 primary challenge against Carter. The rivalry shaped Democratic Party dynamics for decades. Ronald Reagan.
Bye bye. Thanks for watching. Bye.